Welcome back to American Iron Podcast, episode number 6, the deadlift. This is Chad Ikes,
Don't hear me like that.
and myself, Jesse Anderson, the cutest of the bunch. So Chad Ikes is gonna
just said he's cuter than you.
He is. What can I say? There are two basic forms on the deadlift. Something that we call sumo style, and that is where your legs are out and your hands are on the inside of your legs. And then there's conventional form where your legs are in, approximately shoulder width apart, and your arms are on the outside of your legs. Chad prefers sumo.
Yeah, but I do both.
And he does both, and everyone should. So no matter what, if you compete in powerlifting, it doesn't matter whether you're a sumo lifter or a conventional lifter, you should train both because they both work different aspects of your body in strengthening your lift, and they'll help each other and push each other to exceed a higher number, right? In whatever you're competing
Whereas conventional, I think, is more back.
Yep.
And sumo is generally more glutes, hamstrings. Still works your back, but it pulls in your glutes and hamstrings more.
So I'm a conventional specialist, and Chad's a sumo specialist. And I think how we're built has a lot to do with that.
I think it has some to do with it. Like I can pull either one, and actually I can pull similar weight either way. But to me, the sumo is more efficient for me, being as I'm bigger. Getting down in conventional like binds me up kind of, where sumo I can get out wide. And I squat wide anyway, so it's just more efficient for me.
And I've always been able to conventional lift more than I've been able to sumo lift. And I tend to get hamstring injuries from my structure if I sumo heavy. So it's finding out what works for you. But like Chad said, it's important to train both. So Chad, you want to demonstrate conventional first and kind of show us the basic foundation of a conventional deadlift. So like we said, you notice Chad's legs are approximately shoulder width apart and his arms are on the outside of his legs. He has an opposition grip and basically one hand up, one hand down, and that allows for him to maintain a grip at higher weights. If both your hands were overhand, it's easier for the bar to slip out of your hands at higher weight. So just like in the squat and what we talked about last week in the bench, core stability and core tightness are really critical to performing the lift correctly. And this lift definitely translates to an activity of daily lifting. Every time you reach down and grab something off the floor, you're performing a deadlift. How you do that determines if you're going to have a back injury or not. We all know people that have injured themselves lifting up a box that weighed 3 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. And that's because they don't tighten up that core and they lift incorrectly from the ground position or low position.
which I think goes back to one of the biggest things that I look for when I see someone deadlifting is looking at the rounding of their lower back. So basically, they're starting right here, which if their core is tight, they'll be in a more neutral position for their back.
Actually, even in the powerlifting world, the majority of the time the injuries are with light weights.
Right.
Because the lifter goes, oh, it's light, it's no big deal, and they don't get in the right positions.
True.
So even if the weight is light, you should always be consistent with your technique.
Right. Practice how you play, and it doesn't matter if you're lifting the bar or even a light bar that weighs 15 pounds or you're deading 500, 600, 700 pounds, your technique should be the same,
Right.
and your position should be the same. So Chad, talk about what you're doing as you're doing it here.
For me, I like to get my air at the top. It's kind of difficult to get your air once you're already bent over. So the first thing I do is take my big breath and I'll hold it. And then even for me, I'm already building pressure trying to grab that bar. So I'm like, have to kind of pull myself into the bar. So I'm gonna get this grip, my other grip, and I'm actually gonna pull myself into position. At this point, I'm really gonna flex my arch really hard and get really tight. Then with my back, I'm gonna pull the slack out of the bar which with this weight, there's no slack. But you can see me already kind of start lifting it, and I haven't started the lift. And then from that point, I'm gonna fire my back, come straight up my legs.
So now we're gonna get a shot from the side. One of the biggest things is you want the bar path to be straight up and down.
So I'll demonstrate a definite shoulder over.
So this is what you don't want to do. You notice his shoulders are over the front of the bar. That's not where you want to be, because what happens when he does that is it rounds that lower back and it brings his lower body high. So it's a bad starting position. You notice now what he's doing is he's lowering his hips, he's tightening that lower back, and that is bringing his shoulders back to in line with the bar. And just like Jesse was saying, that straight up and down bar path. The bar shouldn't make an S curve. It should be straight up and down.
And kind of what happens if your shoulders are forward, as soon as you pick it up, the bar is going to swing out. That's going to try to pull you forward and roll your back. I'll show that right now. So as soon as I pick it up, the bar wants to swing out, and that's giving me out on my toes instead of staying back on my heels.
Right. And that's a dangerous position for your lower back, for back health, right?
Very.
And that's also where a lot of people start a deadlift incorrectly and cause damage. So we want to make sure that your starting position is the most important thing you can do to do a correct deadlift. Get in your starting position. Take the time to get those shoulders back, tighten that lower body in that core and that lower back before you initiate your pull.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think of when I pull. One is trying to get my arms straight, perpendicular to the ground, and then have all my weight behind the bar. For me, I mean, my head comes forward over the bar a little bit, but I mean, having everything else behind the bar so it's almost pulling back rather than straight up.
Which
the
is
bar
true.
path-
You actually counterbalance yourself with the bar. Like if you pull correctly with a really light weight, you should actually come up and like step back.
And lose your balance,
Yeah,
right?
because
right.
when you get heavy, it's going to counterbalance and be perfectly straight up and down.
He's pulling it against his body. One thing that I've noticed is that it actually forces you to use your upper back. And it's a good cue that I use for beginner lifters. Is if you pull it into yourself, you're not realizing it, but again, you are
Engaging that mid-thoracic area and keeping that
and lats.
tight,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And since we're talking about that, I want to bring up a point. A lot of people think that their deadlift is all lower back. One of the things we found with Jesse is that we needed to strengthen that mid-thoracic area, and that really improved his deadlift and allowed him to stay in a correct position during the pull. For whatever reason, and I think a lot of it has to do with how we're rounded and always over a desk or computer, keyboard, is that we tend to have weakness in our mid-thoracic areas. And that's the area that we find is the weak link in most people's deadlift. So there's a lot of exercises that we do to help people strengthen that up and be able to maintain a good position in their deadlift.
Well, and that's the biggest thing with lockout is being able to get into that position right there.
Right.
Because
If you're like this, you can't get your hips
Yeah.
forward, right?
in competition, they won't count that as a lift. They'll be in the
Until
lift.
your hips come forward.
Exactly.
Right.
I think you did hit, this is a little off topic for right now, but I think you hit something pretty important about as we age and we get older and we're at work and we're sitting all the time and we're bending over, or we go to the bar afterwards and we're sitting hunched on a bar stool. If you look at a lot of older people, they basically lose their glutes
True.
and their hamstrings get tight. And a lot of older people have back problems simply because of muscle weakness and tightness. And coming to the gym, working your abs, working your core, stretching your hamstrings, building the strength in your glutes and hamstrings can actually make that pain completely go away.
And what's the other thing that they tend to lose, right?
Yeah, like posterior. They
right?
do all
Those
the posterior
posterior
stuff.
delts.
Yeah.
And so you'll see people
Like they get like
as
this.
we age start to round more and more forward. And that's that total loss of that upper posterior chain. So really working on strengthening the posterior chain high as well as low, maintains that good erect form, helps with balance,
And keeps your joints in a healthy position.
helps
with
your shoulder
protagonistic
joints.
and antagonistic muscles.
Absolutely.
Which I think is one of the biggest things that I've seen from powerlifting. Because I mean, before just working out at the gym, you know, obviously try and train biceps and chest like all the other guys, and I was like that. I mean,
Yes.
but now powerlifting, getting into those positions, whether it's squat, bench, or deadlift, I mean,
You do have better posture now.
I do. I do stand more straight.
Starting young, and that's important. So we talked about some of I think the biggest mistakes that people make when they start a conventional deadlift. And like you said, the shoulders over the bar, in front of the bar, not tightening the glutes, keeping the bar away from the body, all of those things. So we want to bring the body in
rounding the
tight,
back.
rounding the back. So we want to not have a rounded back, right? We want our shoulders in line with that bar. We want nice, tight glutes and lower back and tight shoulders.
In that respect, the deadlift is a little different because the bench press and the squat, you have an eccentric phase where you can build up tightness.
Going back to the conventional, you said it's more back than sumo, but it still is a lot of legs,
It's still a lot of glutes and hamstrings without a
which
doubt.
I see a lot of people doing
Just
wrong.
trying to pull with their back.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I think we beat up the conventional deadlift pretty well. So let's move on to a sumo. So Chad, if you'll demonstrate a proper form in a sumo, and then we'll talk about the common mistakes made in a sumo lift like we did a conventional. So sumo, like we said, legs out, hands on the inside of his legs. Notice the bar path is straight up and down. Same thing, shoulders are over the top of the bar, not in front of the bar. He lowers his glutes, he tightens his lower back. It's his chest high. Takes that deep breath. Make sure
Takes
that
a break.
it takes a break. Well, you know, we don't want to do too many reps. We don't want to make this an aerobic exercise, Chad. Okay, breathe, breathe. What else, Chad? What are the other things that you think about doing a sumo lift?
I think one of the biggest things for me, again, is tightness, pulling the tension out of the bar with my back. Not necessarily trying to push up with my legs, but pulling my back. I think about pulling at a 45. So I'm pulling the tension out like this, which gives me that, pulls the bar into me and gives me that balance.
Good.
And I always think about driving my back first from that point. Some people think about driving through the floor.
I like both, and it depends on the person, but when people continually lift their hips first and then lever, deadlift should be one movement. And whether you're doing a conventional deadlift or a sumo deadlift, a lot of people initially make the mistake of making it two separate movements. And their first movement is their hips lever up, and then their upper body levers back. It's very difficult, one, on your back and your body to do that, and it's two, when you're at heavier weights, it's very difficult to complete the lift.
Which I
You're
think
basically making it into a straight leg deadlift.
Right.
the biggest thing that I feel between the sumo and conventional is sumo takes a lot more patience, especially off the ground, getting into that position, because I see a lot of guys kind of almost treat it like a conventional and try and rip it off the ground, which again turns into that two-part movement, because they try and rip it, and then it turns into slow.
So their hips come up, and then their upper body comes up.
Going back to what Chad said, I mean, really trying to pull that slack out. It's going to take a while, and it's going to seem like you're on the bottom forever. But I mean, once you do get it off the ground, if it's done properly, it should just fly right up.
It moves. Yep. A lot more speed off the ground once the movement starts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to show the posture of the sumo deadlift from the side. So again, it's very similar to the conventional where you want all your weight behind you, behind the bar. One of the biggest things that I see is people collapsing their knees when doing the sumo.
Yeah. Good point.
They're not, when I go down to grab the bar, I focus on pushing my knees out while sitting down.
And engaging your glutes, right? Because
exactly,
when
exactly.
your glutes are engaged, you can't bring your knees in if you engage them properly.
That's the same for me at the bottom. I'm thinking about forcing my knees out and my butt back.
Which, if you do that properly, it will eliminate kind of the rounding in the lower back.
Movement.
And shooting that butt up.
If you do one movement, I think personally that the deadlift is the most important one because it translates so much to activities of daily living. Thoughts on that? Squat. I know,
I like the
the boys like the squat.
I like the squat.
But for an aging person,
I think they should do all three.
you should, absolutely. Absolutely should do all three.
Why can you only have one? This
You
is one
don't have
instance
to,
where you
oh
can
my
have
God.
all three.
You know, okay, all right. You can have all three. But if you couldn't, I think this one,
I picked the squat.
I still like the squat, yeah.
it's because they both squat 900 plus pounds.
Actually, I like laying down, so the benching's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad, it's not bad.
If I had a cool bench, then maybe benching.
Yeah, you're getting better. I hope that we gave you some valuable information that helps you, if you haven't done a deadlift before, helps you have a starting point to be able to do a deadlift correctly and add it into your exercise regime. And if you have done a deadlift before and plan on competing, or maybe are thinking about competing, I hope that things that we talked about gives you the information you need to have a more successful lift in competition. So thank you for joining us. From Tamara,
Chad?
Jesse.
we'll see you next Monday morning at 6 a.m. Thank you.